We shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to St. Luke. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 lepers approached him. Keeping their distance, they called out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were made clean. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. He prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean? But the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." The Gospel of Christ. Praise to you, Christ. Please be seated. The readings for today, the readings for Thanksgiving Day, are, I think, uniquely Canadian, chosen to represent Thanksgiving as a North American celebration, and actually adopted as an alternative or a parallel to the old harvest festival scriptures of earlier centuries. And perhaps that's why the words from Deuteronomy and Psalm 65 and 2 Corinthians are seemingly so apt in capturing some of our Canadian identity. But sadly, ironically, while they are written about a promised land that is today so much racked by vengeance and fury, we can only imagine them as ours, bringing us to a good land, with flowing streams, with springs and underground waters welling up in valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land where you may eat bread without scarcity, a land whose stones are iron and from whose hills you may mine copper. And when you have eaten your fill and have built fine houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks and silver and gold are multiplied, and so on and so on. And in the psalm, where your wagon tracks overflow with richness, the meadows clothe themselves with flocks, the valleys deck themselves with grain. And from St. Paul, maybe a little out of context, every blessing in abundance, and you will be enriched in every way, as we are, as we are. I was in Hamilton last week on Monday, taking my wife Trish to a medical appointment, nothing serious. So I had a little time to kill. And you may remember Monday was a perfect fall day, fresh, sunlit, with a light breeze. So I wandered down to the docks and found a stream of tractor trailers heading down Burlington Street to the elevators there, carrying grain from all around Niagara to be shipped out into a hungry world. There were men at work and a sign offering free skills training to any who ask, jobs, men working on ships in the dry dock, and at least one icebreaker there, as well as a huge tug and 2 Great Lakes vessels in for service. And there too was the Keewatin, an old ship, the SS Keewatin, built in 1907 to serve as a trans-Canada link between Port McNicoll on Lake Huron and Port Arthur on Lake Superior, a link before the Trans-Canada Highway was opened in the 50s. The Keewatin's 300 and something feet long. It was sailed across the Atlantic on her maiden voyage, was too big for the Welland Canal, was cut into 2, put back together in Buffalo, and thereafter for 50 years crisscrossed lakes Huron and Lake Superior for all those years. And now it's in Hamilton for a refit after wallowing a second 50 years in forgotten harbors. She's getting ready to sail to Kingston to be a waterfront museum piece. Older than the Titanic, tougher than toenails, as they say. So everything in Hamilton on Monday, from a new harvest being delivered to an icebreaker to an old part of the Trans-Canada route, was all quintessentially Canadian. And as I walked away, a dockyard foreman hurried by wearing a hard hat and carrying a sheaf of drawings, and he waved. And I said, "Not a bad day for a Monday." And he stopped and laughed and said, "No, not a bad day for a Monday." I came to Niagara on January the 1st, 2000, which I guess makes me a millennial or something. And one of the first orders of business was to find a place to live. And in those days, 23 years ago, which doesn't seem that long ago, 23 years ago, an impoverished deacon had a choice of houses in Beamsville for anywhere between 70,000 and, or maybe 200,000. And I was able to scratch together a down payment, and I found a little farmhouse, or maybe it was a workhouse just outside Beamsville, north of the QEW, not very far from the lake. It's not very big, but it has a large kitchen cum family room that was added in the 1960s, and a number of rickety porch additions since. There was a small shed and a modest barn, but the 15 or 20 acres of land that once had been attached to the farm was sold off years ago. But the land is still there for me and my wife and the dog to ramble in, with permission. There's a peach orchard. Then as you drop down towards the creek, through the nectarines, there are plums, and beyond it more peaches, a nut grove, and then a vineyard. There's a lot of wildlife. There are rabbits and groundhogs, skunks, hawks, ducks, coyotes, and on occasion a coy wolf, a wild boar, and a fox. But they're hard to spot. And last Sunday, after church, after the pumpkin fest here, me and the dog went down to the creek and sat in the shade and rested. Dog hates it when I sit down, tries to get underneath me to stop me. I think he's worried that I'm dying right there. But once I'm down, he's okay with it. But when I'm ready to get up, he just turns his back. I guess it's too embarrassing to watch. And from the kitchen window, we can watch the seasons as the migrant workers, the Mexicans, do their thing in the orchards, pruning, thinning, and picking to the sound of mariachi music, the leaves opening on the bare branches in the spring, and the same leaves changing color and falling before the winter. It's actually all amazing. The dependability, the reliability of the seasons, and of the sun, and of the rainfall, and of the astonishing chemistry of it all, and the bounty that comes out of the air and the soil and the genes of the trees. It is quite wonderful. And truly, I give thanks to God for it all. I'm sure you have similar stories of places you've lived, of people you've known, and of sunny days and blue skies and memories of fresh peaches and dogs and all kinds of other things. Now, the gospel today is, as I promised a week or two back, is the story of the 10 lepers. Kind of a short story. Not much flesh on the bare bones of this narrative. Not a parable, it's just a record of Jesus' ministry. On the way to Jerusalem is how it begins. On the way toward trouble is what it means. Jesus is not really welcome there. It's the city where he is to be arrested and sentenced to death. But Jesus is still persevering toward the city. Going through the region between Samaria and Galilee, it says, except there really is no region between Samaria and Galilee. They are attached, they abut one another. So the space Jesus is going through is a pretty thin place. Indeed, the thin places, they say, are where you are likely to meet Jesus. And in that thin place where Samaritans might live, Jesus is accosted by 10 lepers. In Jesus' time, Samaritans were known as outsiders, members of an older Jewish sect with some dubious practices frowned on by mainstream Jews, so Samaritans were rather looked down upon and even despised. And you all remember the story of the Good Samaritan who stepped in to help the bandit's victim on the road to Jericho. The surprise was that it was a Samaritan who did the good deed. So anyway, in this thin space, Jesus meets 10 lepers, 10 untouchables, maybe even ringing a bell, warning people away from their contagion. But when Jesus sees them, he simply says, "Go and show yourselves to the priests," which instruction has an air of finality and authority. Just go and show yourselves to the priests. Because to be confirmed clean and free from disease was a task for a priest. Only they could let you back into society. And as they went, they were made clean. So it's a miracle. And one of them, only one, turns back, praising God with a loud voice, throws himself at Jesus' feet and thanks him. And he was a Samaritan, one of those strange, crazy people. But I couldn't help but feel that the story is somehow incomplete. It's not mathematically resolved. 10 lepers were healed and stayed healed. One of them gave thanks, the Samaritan, which is doubly gratifying, but it doesn't add to his healing. It merely makes the other 9 seem a bit churlish. It's as if giving thanks is not worth anything. And maybe that's it. It doesn't cost anything to give thanks. Giving thanks shouldn't win you a reward. It's just simply the right thing to do. It shows that a gift has been appreciated. Giving thanks is an acknowledgement of your gratitude. The smart nephew gives thanks to his uncle for a Christmas gift, because if he didn't, there might not be another. And the appreciative patient thanks his doctor for her cure, otherwise the doctor might quit and find a more rewarding line of work. If we don't thank God for his many gifts, only God knows what might happen. And they do say that to give thanks, and I was speaking to a psychologist by accident this week, and they do say that to give thanks is to lower your blood pressure, relieve stress, and even extend your life. To which end we might think about the world around us. That what we have received from the Creator and that we are failing to give thanks for, and failing to accept as our responsibility, and failing to appreciate as our inheritance, is what is more important. The hymn we just sang, written by John, is our reminder today that Thanksgiving, that true Thanksgiving, is much more than a casual once-a-year thank you. It's a powerful, poignant challenge, not simply to watch our environment be whittled away, but to defend it as a treasured gift, to appreciate it, and to recognize its value. The pressure on God's country, the pressure on Canada, is mounting. Those high tides and floods on the east coast, the wildfires in the west, and the threat to the green belt, and over it all, the heat of global warming. All signs that humanity is really falling down and failing to give real thanks. I guess it was Monday I went to Hamilton, Tuesday I spoke to the psychologist, and Wednesday I saw a sign outside a church which said, "The real meaning of Thanksgiving is giving." So I thought I should score that, and I gave it 4 out of 10. I don't think the real meaning of Thanksgiving is giving. I think it's much more about giving thanks. giving thanks by actually doing something to protect and preserve, to maintain and multiply the gifts we have received from God. The very environment that produces the grain and the fruit, the very food that feeds us. Now, I dare say you saw that small news item from about a week ago reporting that a tree had been cut down. A single tree that stood alone on the high ground somewhere along Hadrian's Wall, on a windswept, barren ridgeline that separates the serenity of what was the Roman Empire from the original, very hopeless, hapless, barbaric Scottish. It was a single sycamore tree that had stood as a beacon for decades. It had become a destination for hikers, as a photographic icon, as a place that young people went to propose. Been photographed maybe 1 million times, but it had been chainsawed down by a teenager. He was arrested, released on bail, and then a second person had also been charged. No reason given. Surely someone wanting to make a statement, as in, if you don't protect it, you'll lose it. There was only one tree. And of course, there is only one planet. Trees are very special. I understand that they are carbon sinks. They suck carbon dioxide out of the air, extract the carbon, and emit oxygen. They're wonderful oxygenators, cleaning and refreshing the atmosphere all at the same time. So whatever we might wish to be thankful for this year, we might best be thankful for trees. For sycamores and elms and oaks and walnut, for apple and plum, spruce and pine, and of course for maple trees. Today might be a good day to actually allow that you might be a tree hugger. And think for a moment of all the things you have forgotten to be thankful for. All the things you've taken for granted. Just look around. It's not a bad day to give thanks. Amen.